Everyone, welcome back. This is a rush job because I realized I didn't upload part 3 and kids are writing tomorrow. But it's okay because it can be used again for next year. But I think what I'll do is I'll rush through this one and then I'll probably delete this later and then upload a proper one where I go through it properly because obviously this is just for you to use now for this period of time. Keep it nice and short and sweet, and then just finish the novel and all of that. All right, so I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's just get into it. So click this button here. All right, so we start chapter 7 with a very, very blunt, very, very factual, very in your face, the ship sank. So remember we ended the previous chapter off, Pi's happy, he's terribly excited, and then you turn the page and you see the ship sank. Oh, okay. And then he goes into a bit more detail about that. So at this point, we are at the climax of Act 1. Act 1 ends with Pi and his family getting on the ship, and then Act 2 basically begins with this first obstacle of the ship that sinks. Then we get the midpoint, which is the island and the survival moments. Then you have the climax of Act 2, where he gets into that mystical island, and I think he also goes blind at some point, and he kills a guy. And that would be like the climax of Act 2. And then we've got Act 3, where the boat comes along to fetch Richard Parker and Pi, but they don't manage to get hold of the boat, but the little lifeboat manages to come ashore. Richard Parker just unceremoniously just gets off the boat, doesn't even look back at Pi, and just walks into the jungle. And that Pi ends up in hospital, and he speaks to the guys that were basically the officials of the Tum Tum investigating and all of that. And that is the denouement or the wrap up. So that is what we are going to be running through very, very fast now. So when you get into that exam venue, you're going to get either contextual or an essay. Now, I'm going to see if I can cover both in this video. I'm really going to rush through it. But when you get into that exam venue and you decide you want to do the contextual, you don't want to do the essay, then what you need to do is you need to read the text and the questions carefully. So oftentimes with English, people get tripped up because they use very big words, or they speak about things that are not really present in the passage itself. And so you need to read the passage to understand where in the novel it occurs, or that there's that word again, context, the background, where are we now? Some questions will ask for your understanding of the novel as a whole. So you'll see that they'll give you an extract, but then none of the questions really relate to the extract. They're actually asking things around the extract. So just be aware of that. Before you, obviously your reading time is up now, you need to start. So then you go to your question words and you underline your keywords there, like discuss, explain, account for, give your opinion, words like that. You underline all of them because it's kind of going to guide you into how to answer that question. Always look at your mark allocation. They usually are about 3 marks, which means it's either 3 ideas well discussed, or 3 ideas or 2 ideas that are very well discussed. During your exam, you need to attempt to answer all questions. So even if you're not sure if you're right or wrong, just try your best and try to answer the question, because you might be right. Always back up your answer with evidence. So if you, for example, say that Pi saw Richard Parker as a threat, this is because he decided he needed to make a separate boat for himself, and then he had to train Richard Parker. So that shows he saw Richard Parker as a threat. So whatever you say as an answer, you always need to provide evidence so that the examiner knows that you're not just sucking your thumb. And this tends to happen a lot in English papers, is that people tend to suck thumb and they come up with all sorts of weird and wonderful things. Now, if you can back up your weird and wonderful things with evidence from the text, then you could still get the mark for that. Remember to use your own words unless you are asked to quote. Okay, you're not going to get any marks if you're not showing any insight or understanding into the novel. You must always include a statement and then the substantiation or your reasons, and your discussion must be based on the novel. So don't start talking about life in general and all of the things that are going through your mind. Always relate things back to the novel. So here's an example from a past paper. The question was, why is Pondicherry no longer Pi's home? And firstly, we need to say, why is it Pi's home in the first place? It's because Pi grew up in Pondicherry. So that's our statement. Now we're going to show how is it no longer his home. It's because his parents decided that the family should immigrate to Canada. It's because Pi was the only survivor after the sinking of Tsum Tsum. So even if he went back to Pondicherry, there'd be no one there waiting for him. And after Pi's rescue, he could not return to Pondicherry because there was nothing for him there. So there you've got your 3 separate ideas, 3 marks, right? Now, after you've answered your questions, it's very important to go back and read over it again. Have you misread or misunderstood the question? So this is something that happened to my brother. 2016 economic exam. He had a question, essay question at the end. And it was either on macroeconomics or microeconomics. And he misread the question, and I think he read macro as micro. And then he wrote a very beautiful essay on microeconomics and got absolutely no marks for it because the question was asking about macroeconomics. So please be careful of that. Make sure that you read your question carefully, read it over, especially if you suffer from dyslexia or other learning disabilities. It's very easy for your brain to just get confused and switch things around. So it's nice to go back once the exam is done and got all that stress and trauma out of you and just read over it and make sure that you did everything correctly. Then you need to check, have you included enough justification for the mark allocation? So if it's 3 marks and you've only written like 1 line, you're not going to get all 3 marks. So please make sure that, okay, it's 3 marks, I need to write 3 things, or I need to write 2 things, but I need to be very in-depth about it. And does the answer show insight of the novel as a whole? So I don't want you to just refer to what you read in the text. Refer to things that happen later on in the novel, because then you are showing the examiner that you actually know what happened later on in the novel and you've read the novel. Also check for spelling mistakes and grammar errors, because in English papers, they do mark you down for that, or in language papers in general. So how do you find answers? Some of them are in the book. So the answer is easily found in the text. The exact words for the questions and answers are located in the same sentence. You can also think and search. The answer is in the text, but it requires you to think a little bit about it. Maybe things that you did in class as well, and put that together. In your head, the answer is not in the text. You need to combine your previous knowledge with information from the text to create a response. And then on your own, that's when it asks for your opinion. In that case, you need to use your own understanding and your own experiences to respond. Nobody can help you with that one. That is just showing your ability to think. So this is how chapter 37 starts. I'm not going to read it because it's going to take too long, but let's have a look at what we need to do if this was the extract we got. Firstly, we start with that sentence, the ship sank. What is the effect of that short sentence? It immediately kind of zaps us into the story. What the heck? What happened? Why did the ship sink? What's going on? And then we see it made a sound like a monstrous metallic burp. What figure of speech is that? So can a ship burp? No, it's personification. And then monstrous metallic would be, what do they call that? Assonance. Oh, I haven't taught English in a long time. Alliteration, sorry. So you've got some alliteration, you've got some personification there. It's very, very vivid imagery. The things bubbled at the surface and then vanished. Everything was screaming. The sea, the wind, my heart. Once again, we see that personification. Can a heart scream? No. But why is he referring to the heart as screaming? Because maybe that's the pain that he feels. Like if we hear a scream, we think, oh, that's somebody's getting hurt. So if his heart is screaming, that means his heart is getting hurt. The wind screaming would obviously be that loud, and the sea obviously making that clapping sound of the waves coming together. So how does that sort of imagery make you feel? He could have said, for example, that everything was silent. And that's what they actually said about the sinking of the Titanic. While the actual Titanic was sinking, it was all noisy, and then after the ship sank, it was just complete dead silence. And many of the survivors of the Titanic actually spoke about how that was actually more scary than the sounds of the actual ship sinking. Not related, but interesting to know. And then from the lifeboat, I saw something in the water. I cried, Richard Parker, is that you? It's so hard to see. Oh, that this rain would stop. Richard Parker? Richard Parker? Yes, it is you. So at this point, if you've been reading the novel without anybody telling you anything about it, you wouldn't know that Richard Parker is a tiger. I think this is the first time that they actually reveal that. I might be wrong though. It's been a while. But Richard Parker is a familiar figure to Pi because it's someone from his old life in Pondicherry. It's something. Sorry. It also is a familiar figure that he can reach out to when everything else is lost, right? I could see his head. He was struggling to stay at the surface of the water. And then Pi says, Jesus, Mary, Muhammad, and Vishnu. How good to see you, Richard Parker. Don't give up. Please, come to the lifeboat. Do you hear this whistle? Tree, tree, tree. You heard right. Swim, swim. You're a strong swimmer. It's not 100 feet. So in this little paragraph sentence, Pi is referring to multiple religious figures. Why? So we know that Pi has this multi-religion kind of vibe going on. He believes in Christianity, he believes in Hinduism, he believes in Islam, and he takes all of these religions and he uses them together and he believes them all together. And even now you can see he's using those, that his multiple experiences of religion, he's calling upon it, and it's giving him courage, it's giving him strength. It's so good that Richard Parker is here. It's a blessing from above. It's a blessing from the Almighty, right? Then we see he had seen me. He looked stricken. He started swimming my way. The water about him was shifting wildly. He looked small and helpless. So we know that Richard Parker is a tiger, so it's very ironic to see him being described as small and helpless. And then it says, what are you doing, Richard Parker? Don't you love life? Keep swimming then. Tree, tree, tree. Kick your legs. Kick, kick, kick. And why does Pi want Richard Parker to cling to life? So this tiger is dangerous. Pi's on the ship or this lifeboat, and he's calling the danger towards him because he's calling this tiger to come on the boat with him. And he stirred in the water and made to swim. And what of my extended family? Birds, beasts, and reptiles. They too have drowned. Every single thing I value in life has been destroyed. So his extended family, his original family is his mom, his dad, and his brother. They are gone. And then he also speaks about the animals, the birds, the beasts, and the reptiles. And you will remember in the first couple of chapters, Pi's mother says that Pi has a lot of love for animals and he sort of sees them as a second family. And we can see that here as well in this extract. Did I eventually answer why Pi wanted Richard Parker to cling to life? So the reason Pi wants Richard Parker to cling to life is because it's the last remnant of his previous life. And Richard Parker is also, if you believe the second story later on about the ship that sank, then you will believe Richard Parker is that part of Pi that knows how to survive, that fights. And he needs, even though Richard Parker is dangerous, he needs that sort of danger to keep him on his toes, to kind of get him in that mood of survival. So an important thing to think about when you encounter an extract is to think about what happens before it and what happens after it. Always place an extract in context. So this is an example from the May-June 2022 paper of the way that questions could be asked on an extract like this. 9.1, account for Pi's reaction to seeing Richard Parker in the water, 3 marks. Refer to that line about the family that drowns. Discuss the impression of Pi created in this line, also 3 marks. 9.3, refer to line 2, everything was screaming. Comment on the effectiveness of this image, 3 marks. And 9.4, Jesus, Mary, Muhammad, Vishnu, based on your knowledge of the novel, discuss the significance of this reference. So let's go through it quickly. Account means you need to give reasons for or explain, and you need to explain what Pi's reaction to seeing Richard Parker in the water. So if we go back there, let's go back. Is Pi upset? No. He specifically says, let me highlight that, how good, ooh, no, that's not the highlighter. Where's the highlighter? How good to see it. Okay, wait, clear all. Okay, I don't know where the highlighted tool is. I knew where it was the last time, but okay, let me underline that. How good to see you, Richard Parker. So we know that Pi is very happy to see Richard Parker because he says how good to see you, and he kind of encourages Richard Parker to swim and get to the lifeboat. So we know that Pi is overjoyed or very happy at the sight of another living being. At this point, he thinks he's the only survivor. He doesn't know about the other animals on the boat. So he is comforted by Richard Parker's presence because he reminds Pi of home and makes him feel less alone. He is eager to rescue Richard Parker as it diverts his attention away from his own sense of fear and loss. So while he's focusing on Richard Parker, he's not thinking about all the things that he's lost. He's not thinking about his mother and father and brother that have just passed away. He's not thinking about all the animals that died on the Tsimtsang. He is just zooming in on Richard Parker, and that makes him feel less alone. So that is why Pi is so excited to see Richard Parker. It is in Pi's nature to want to protect all forms of life, and this is the beginning of Pi's fight for survival. So then we get to 9.2, discuss the impression of Pi created in this line. Now, when we speak about impression, you might be familiar with the term first impressions. Like when you meet someone for the first time, what do you think of them? Now, if you had read this for the first time and you knew nothing about Pi, what would this extract tell you about Pi? And it tells you that Pi's distress at the loss of the animals shows that he's very sensitive, he's very empathetic, he's someone that cares about everyone and everything. He loves all God's creatures equally, and he does not make he doesn't distinguish between animal life and human life. So he speaks about his family, but then he also speaks about his extended family, being the birds and the reptiles and all the other animals. He also has a tendency, which we saw in the earlier chapters as well, to anthropomorphize. So anthropomorphize means you give an animal human characteristics. And we see this throughout this novel, Richard Parker being the biggest example of a tiger with a human name. Thus, he sees the zoo animals as his extended family. All right. So that's 3 things, 3 marks. Then refer to line 2. Everything was screaming, the sea, the wind, and my heart. Comment on, so comment on means give your opinion, the effectiveness. So when you see that word effectiveness, they're asking you, what is this phrase? Is it effective in making you feel something? Is it effective in doing something? And you have to look at this image. The image is a screaming sea, wind, and heart. So if you close your eyes and I read this, I'm going to read it again. Everything was screaming. The sea, the wind, my heart. Is this an effective image? How does it make you feel? What does it make you think? Right? That's what this question is asking you to do. So firstly, we've got the personification of the elements of nature emphasizes the power of the storm. So we can get the sense that it's a very, very bad storm because of the use of personification here. The word screaming, which I have spoken about, implies that the noises of the storm are high-pitched and terrifying. By giving his heart the ability to scream, Pi conveys the intensity of his distress. So he's very, 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 very sad at what is happening. And therefore, this screaming idea shows how sad he is to a better degree than just saying Pi was sad. He is at the mercy of the vagaries. Sorry, I don't know that word, of nature, and the image conveys a sense of panic and fear. So you get this, everything is moving all around you, everything is screaming. It shows that idea of panic, it shows the idea of fear. And the elements become a reflection of Pi's own feelings, right? So this is actually, I would argue, you could put this under two ideas well discussed. These two ideas here, I feel if I were the teacher, I would have given 3 marks for having these two ideas together, and that personification wouldn't be necessary. However, the personification mark would have been the easiest one to get, I think, for people. The word emphasizes is also going to be very important to you when you go into your English paper, because it's sort of a cheat word. If you don't know what to write, then emphasize is usually the word, your go-to word. The reason the writer does this is to emphasize blah blah blah, but you need to know what the writer is trying to emphasize, right? But that is going to be your cheat word. Why is this not clicking? So here you can see that there's that idea of the image, and here it ties again with this idea of the image. Then 9.4, refer to line 7, Jesus, Mary, Muhammad, and Vishnu. Based on your knowledge of the novel as a whole, discuss the significance of this reference. So the word significance means importance, and the novel as a whole means you can't just discuss things that you see in the extract. You need to discuss things that come before the extract, and you also need to discuss things that come after the extract. So we've got Pi's reference to the figures from the 3 different religions indicates his multi-faith approach to life. So we know Pi believes in all 3 religions, Hinduism, Christianity, and Islam. And by referring to Jesus, Mary, Muhammad, and Vishnu, that shows his multi-faith approach to life. He believes that love is at the heart of all religions and is able to see the commonality in their values and essential beliefs. Right? So that's basically just tying that idea of, by using them all together, he's taking all of these different religions and he's making it into one. Pi senses the divine presence in everything. It is second nature for him to refer to the different faiths he follows, because he is such a religious person, because he's such a pious person. When he calls out things like that, he doesn't even think about it. He calls out to every single god that he knows. His belief in a higher power, regardless of the name of the deity, sustains him throughout his ordeal at sea and in his adult life. So, if you guys remember from the novel, his prayer ritual really keeps him grounded. His salah that he makes is also keeping him grounded because he gets his body involved. And he always keeps his religion at the forefront of his mind, or he tries to the best of his ability. The religion also gives him strength and fortitude to endure suffering. So when he, for example, sees Richard Parker struggling there in the water, and he immediately goes to every single god he knows, and he's like, please, please, please let this animal get on this boat and we will survive together. So the religious ritual comforts him and the prayer connects him to a higher power. All right, so this is also some extracts from past papers, also kind of around that idea of Richard Parker as Pi's savior. I'm not going to go into it right now because it's going to take too long, but do yourself a favor, read chapter 57. It's something that has come up in 2 papers. As you can see, I've gone through about maybe 5 or 6 different past papers, and it's come up a few times. So chapter 57 is definitely something you need to focus on when you do your reading. Right, so now we get into the idea of a reality versus illusion. This is that carnivorous island thing. So I'm going to keep it very short and sweet because we don't have a lot of time. Let's have a look at what is real, what is fake, and does it matter? So the algae island is one of the most surreal or weird sections of the book. At first, Pi thinks the island is a mirage or hallucination, but then he realizes he can stand on it. In the day, the island is a paradise, but at night it turns deadly. The island sort of represents having an easy faith. So people that were kind of born into a religion and they just kind of follow it, but they don't like truly believe in it or anything like that. So it seems stable at first glance, but it actually has a rotten side to it. The island also represents a sort of Garden of Eden where Pi loses his innocence, because it's after this that he starts murdering things and all of those things that he goes through. Pi also rejects the island. He decides this is not what he wants, and he gets on the boat and he leaves with Richard Parker, even though it offers some hope for him. So this is an example of where it was in a past paper. It's usually from chapter 92, where he basically decides to leave the island, and he also decides to bring Richard Parker with him. Right. So I'm not going to go into that too much. You can read through that on your own. Right. And then we have chapter 99. So this is where everything ends, where Pi has been rescued and he's in hospital, and these two guys come to him and ask him what happened. We know that the Tsimtsum sank on this day, and we know that you were picked up on that day. What happened in between? And Pi tells these guys the two stories. He tells them the story that we just read about the tiger, and then he also tells them a story about having to kill his mother and the cook and the chef and blah 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 blah. And he asks the guy at the end, neither of those two stories explains the sinking of the Tsimtsum, and neither makes any difference to them. They can't prove which story is true and which is not. They need to believe Pi. So in both stories, the ship sinks, his entire family dies, and Pi suffers. And since it makes no difference, they can't prove anything, which story do they prefer? And Pi asks him, which is the better story, the one with the animals or the story without the animals? And Mr. Okamoto says, that's an interesting question, while Mr. Chiba says, the story with the animals. Then Mr. Okamoto also says, the story with the animals is the better story. And then Pi finishes by saying, thank you. And so it goes with God. So what does this extract tie into that idea of the better story? Remember, we mentioned this earlier when Pi was talking about all his different religions, and about the kind of stories that these religions tell and which one is the better story and all of those things. And then you also have, what is Pi implying about God in this extract? You know, remember that very big statement that was made at the beginning, this is going to be a book or a story that makes you believe in God. And as I was going through this, I was actually thinking of something that my life science teacher told me at school. Well, not me specifically, but our class. And she actually said to us, look, if you look at it this way, if you die and there's no God, you lose nothing. But if you die and there is a God, then you lose everything. So what do you choose you want to believe? And I think this is more or less what Pi is trying to say here. With God, you cannot prove that God exists. It makes no difference to your life whether God exists. But which one would you prefer to believe? The outcome where God exists and all your loved ones are waiting for you in heaven, or whatever the case may be, or you will be reincarnated, or whatever the case, whatever you believe. Or would you prefer the pure facts? This is going to happen, that's going to happen, this is going to happen, right? And this is what Pi is actually trying to tell Mr. Okamoto and Mr. Chiba. Right, so now we go into the theme of survival. What does it take to overcome tremendous suffering, instinct, knowledge, faith, right? Maybe a combination of all of these. So how Pi survives in this novel is that he has to learn to adapt to the situation. He doesn't have a lot of control over what is happening around him, so he has to improvise, adapt, and overcome. He also needs to remember valuable lessons. You'll remember that his dad in the beginning taught him that tigers are dangerous. He also taught him how to train animals and things like that. So Pi uses those lessons that he learned from his father to survive on that boat with Richard Parker. He holds on to hope. So even when things look hopeless, he always looks for the positive. He always looks for another way. He doesn't give up even when he comes very close to doing it. I think Richard Parker actually keeps him alive and keeps him going. He has a reason for living, so to say. He also accepts that he has nothing to lose. So in the one section where he's on that little dinghy thing, and Richard Parker is on the ship. He actually, not on the ship, on the lifeboat. He actually moves from his dinghy to the lifeboat because he realizes, I got nothing to lose. I can stay on the dinghy and die, or I can go on the lifeboat and die and maybe live. And by accepting that, and he becomes courageous, he managed to conquer Richard Parker and control Richard Parker as well. He distracts himself by his prayers and all of those things as well. Pi also becomes mentally strong. There are moments where he's weak, where he starts to hallucinate, and where he starts to think of terrible things and things like that. But he tries his best to remain mentally strong all throughout the journey. He stays active in his mind and his body. He depends on himself because he knows he cannot rely on outside help. When he has the second, what was it a sailor? I don't know what it was, but there was a second survivor that managed to get on his lifeboat at a time when he's blind. And what happens is that person tries to take advantage, and then Richard Parker ends up killing that person. So Pi then has to depend on himself. He needs to realize that he cannot rely on outside help. Another example of this is when that ship comes towards the end, and it just doesn't see them, and they get missed. Oh, my microphone is not working properly, apparently. Hello? Hello? Oh, no. Let's see. Check. Hello? Testing, testing, testing. Testing, testing. Okay. Does look like it's working. So let's continue that again from here. Ooh, where did I stop? Where did I stop? Yes, baby, it's me. Where's my dog? From current slide. Zoom slideshow. Okay, cool. He looks for the positives, he goes one step at a time, and he keeps his sense of humor. So he also competes to survive, obviously, with the other animals in the beginning, then with Richard Parker, and then he holds on to his faith throughout the entire journey, and it gives him the strength that he needs to overcome adversity. So where does Richard Parker fit into all of this? It was Richard Parker who calmed me down. It is the irony of the story that the one who scared me witless to start with was the very same who brought me peace, purpose, I dare say even wholeness. And then we've got a question, for example, that would say, write an essay of 400 to 450 words in which you discuss this statement made by Pi at the end of the novel. Describe how Richard Parker changes from being an agent of death for Pi to being his savior. So when you do your essay writing, you need to start with a hook. So this is the one thing that I like in English that I can't do in history. But you can use figurative language, you can make it so exciting, and you can basically write whatever you want to draw that reader in, and you call that a hook. A good hook, just by reading a good hook, the marker or the examiner already knows it's going to be a brilliant essay. So just make sure that you have that awesome hook to get that person interested into what you've got to say. You also need to show an understanding of the question. You need to outline the main points required by the question, and you need to show how the essay will answer the question. And I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute. So this is an example of an introduction. So our hook is, when Pi finds himself drifting in a small lifeboat with a tiger, he is full of fear, knowing that the animal will inevitably kill and devour him. So why is this a hook? Because as the examiner is reading this, they're thinking, oh my word, Pi is going to die at the end. But we know that Pi does not die at the end. So the hook kind of draws the examiner in, makes an exciting statement. Then we go and we actually outline what's going to be in the essay. We're going to say this essay will discuss how Richard Parker provides Pi with two things essential to his survival. So that shows that we understand the question, how Richard Parker is Pi's savior. And then we've got the essay outline there. We're going to talk about that companionship. We're going to talk about the challenge of keeping him alive and training the tiger to keep a safe distance. In this way, the tiger, instead of being his killer, ironically helps Pi find the will to live, as well as bringing him emotional and spiritual peace and wholeness. And that shows how the essay will answer the question. So in your body, you need to have 5 or 6 paragraphs of motivation. You can have less, you can have more, it's all up to you. But each of your paragraphs will focus on a central idea. You start with a topic sentence, so one sentence that tells the examiner what that paragraph is going to be about. You provide examples from the text, either through paraphrasing or quoting. And please keep in mind, with your quote, you need to use exact words. If you cannot remember exact words, then rather paraphrase, right? If you quote and you quote incorrectly, you will lose marks for that. So best thing to do is just to paraphrase. If you do want to quote, one thing that you can do is you can go to your text and you can see if there's anything in the text that you can quote. That's how I did it back in the day. So explain how your examples answer the question. Yeah, so that's what you do in your body. So you're going to give a topic sentence, you're going to provide examples, and then show how that examples show how the tiger moved from an agent of death to Pi savior. You need to analyze and interpret the text for better marks. So we don't just want to hear you tell us the story. We want you to actually analyze the text and use that, the English teacher way. Why is the sky blue? Well, it's because the sky's blue. And the English teacher says, no, the sky is blue because the sky is sad. That's your analyzing and your interpretation. So we want to see that in a English essay. Use linking or transitional words like therefore, as a result, due to this, additionally, also, moreover, furthermore, again, then, besides, etc. So in this essay, perhaps paragraph 1, you explain Richard Parker's role in giving Pi the motivation to live. In paragraph 2, you'll discuss why Pi must keep Richard Parker alive. Paragraph 3, you'll give the details of the action, development, and skills needed to survive. Paragraph 4, you'll say how Pi ensured his safety from Richard Parker. Paragraph 5, you'll speak about all the results and the irony in the shift of Richard Parker's role. And I don't know if you know why I've got a skeleton there. It's because it's the body. Ha 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 ha. So use quotes from the novel. Oh, yeah, this is how to elevate your writing. Use quotes from the novel. Memorize 1 or 2 that you just have in the back of your head as you go in. If you can't memorize a quote, then rather take it from the extract if it is relevant. Avoid summarizing the plot, so focus on what the question is asking you to do. Identify the themes and explain them in context. Use formal language, in other words, you can't use slang, and try to keep your related ideas together. So this is an example of a paragraph where we start with, oh goodness, I didn't make that thing. I was supposed to put a transition or an animation on and I didn't, but it's okay. At first, Richard Parker is an agent of death to Pi. He comes to realize that he and Richard Parker can survive if Pi can overcome the challenges presented by the tiger. In this way, he can also overcome his deep despair at the loss of his family. At first, he thinks he can survive if he allows the tiger to die of hunger and thirst, so the tiger will no longer threaten his safety. When he thinks logically about this plan, he realizes that the tiger, driven by extreme hunger and thirst, could leap into the sea and attack him on his raft. He also realizes that he does not want to face the ordeal completely alone. Thus, he decides he has to keep Richard Parker alive at all costs and find a way of preventing the tiger from attacking him. So, in that first paragraph, which is our introduction, we refer to that theme of survival. We're using words from the question, such as agent of death. Then as we move to the second paragraph, we've got our transition word, which is at first. And then we also, in that paragraph, we show how Richard Parker is an agent of death. Richard Parker will eat him if he gets very, very hungry. Right? So he needs to find a way to stop Richard Parker from eating him, and he also needs to find a way to survive. So this is going to show us. So this decision pushes him into developing survival skills such as catching fish and sea turtles. So this topic sentence, survival skills, and then our examples will be catching fish and sea turtles. He ensures a ration of fresh water from the rain and from the stills, which converts seawater to fresh water. In this way, he ensures a regular supply of food both for himself and Richard Parker, so that he survives due to the survival skills that he has to develop to keep himself safe from Richard Parker. In order to keep Richard Parker at a safe distance and to establish his dominance over the tiger, Pi successfully uses his knowledge of animal psychology and lion taming. So that's another topic sentence. And then our examples is he positively reinforces Richard Parker with food and water, and the negative reinforcement is blowing the whistle and rocking the boat to make the tiger seasick. Thus, Pi manages to develop valuable skills which give him confidence and hope. Once again, we've got a topic sentence and then we've got our explanation and examples. Now, remember the question is asking us how does he go from being an agent of death to a savior? So now I'm using that word again, ironic, that I referred to in the previous video. Irony is when something is the opposite of what you expect, and while a tiger would usually be expected to be an agent of death, ironically, during this ordeal, Richard Parker turns out to be Pi's companion rather than his killer and comes to represent a family member to Pi, in the sense that the tiger is a creature for which Pi has to care for and to who he expresses his most intimate thoughts and feelings. With your conclusion, you need to refer back to the question and prove how your essay has answered the question. So here's an example. In the end, having survived his ordeal, Pi feels physically and emotionally stronger. The love he develops for the tiger brings him wholeness and peace, since it is love. And the pastor at the beginning said, God is love. So the love of God, which he had been seeking in his pursuit of his three religions, he finds it through taking care of this tiger. Right. So what I did was I took the question and I wrote my own response, like one that wasn't in the memo. I just took how I would have written it. And I didn't finish. I only wrote about 200 words. But just to give you a sense that in English, there's no right answer. You just need to make sure that you have reasons for whatever your interpretation of the question is. So this is how I would have done it. When one thinks tiger, the first word that comes to mind is ferocity. The word danger prances behind it like a tail. One doesn't immediately think of peace, purpose, or wholeness. Unless you are Pi Patel, that is. Over the course of his journey, Pi moves from seeing Richard Parker as an agent of death to becoming his savior and his reason to continue to live. This is due to the fact that Richard Parker serves as Pi's primary motivator for his survival. So there you can see I'm referring back to that idea of survival. I use that idea of agent of death. I use the idea of savior, and my hook kind of draws people in because we're thinking of tigers, ferocity, danger, but for Pi, the tiger serves as peace, purpose, and wholeness. When the ship first sinks, Pi manages to find a raft that is quickly overtaken by Richard Parker. Pi's father's words about the danger of a tiger immediately comes to his mind, and Pi is effectively banished to a makeshift life raft while the tiger roams freely on the main lifeboat. At first, Pi was afraid of Richard Parker. However, Richard Parker's survival saves Pi from facing the despair of losing his family and push Pi to go on living. He eventually realizes that in order to survive, he will have to train Richard Parker. So, yeah, there you go. That's just an example of another way that the question could have been answered. I don't know what I would have gotten for it. I would have given myself a good mark, you know. But there is no right answer to an English essay. You just need to make sure that whatever you say, you can justify it. So here's my bibliography of all the places I got information from. You can check it out if you like. And yeah, I hope that helps. Keep well and good luck for tomorrow. I know it's very short notice. I'm going to probably re-upload this and do it in a bit more depth. Or maybe not. I'm lazy, so probably not. Good luck!